Welcome back. I hope you had a great break. I am not going to stretch this out very long because I want to just be able to jump right back in. But again, we're going to have a session with Krista, then with Talitha, a story from Talitha, then a session with Aaliyah, and a story from April before we do a little bit more intentional reflection, planning kind of what comes next. Because, right, you don't want to spend all this time listening and thinking and reflecting and then, like, now what do you do with it? So that's what we'll do for the afternoon and be done. The chat room will stay open until 2:30 Eastern. So feel free to hang around and chat if you need to. Otherwise, we will be meeting up in Brave Together this week with some of these reflection questions to kind of broaden the conversation. Some people maybe weren't able to attend but would really like to talk about this stuff, and it's always great to get other perspectives and stories on these things. So that's all I have for you. I'm really excited about the rest of the afternoon, so let's get to it.
Hello, friends. I am so glad to be joining you for the Dream Virtual Retreat. I'm Krista Hutchins from Do a New Thing, and I'm excited to be here with you today. You've taken an important step towards your dream. Just the fact that you've invested time and money to be here today tells me that you think this dreaming thing is important. And I do too. So we already have something in common. I spend a lot of time talking to women about their dreams and helping them make plans to take their next steps. And the one thing I find that all of them have in common is they feel like they don't have enough time to do the things they want to do or the things they feel like they need to do. They're trying to balance all of the things in their life, their home, their family, their ministry, along with all the other roles we as women carry around with our dreams. I'm here to tell you that the idea of balance is a myth, but I bet you've already figured that out on your own, just by the struggles and the guilt that you feel as you try to achieve balance. But before we talk more about that, I want to share with you one of my favorite passages of the Bible. I love Matthew 11:28 through 30. It's especially the message version of it. So right now, I want you to just sit back from the computer, close your eyes, and let these words from Jesus wash over your heart. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I don't know about you, but when I first heard that verse, I felt my soul unfurl just a little bit. It was an almost physical release of years of expectations, requirements, and self-imposed rules designed for me to keep up with the race, to stay balanced. The idea that I could live freely and lightly was completely foreign to me. Living was anything but free and light. It was full of deadlines, juggling home and work, feeling guilty that I was doing none of it well. The part that really stood out to me was this: learn the unforced rhythms of grace. Because everything in my life felt forced. I'm forced to spend a couple of hours every day cooking and cleaning. I'm forced to spend 40 hours or more every week at my job. I'm forced to spend 3 hours in a chair every month getting this gray covered. Okay, that struggle is real, right? But when I thought about it, I still had a lot of hours left over that were unforced. And what was I doing with those? What was I doing to use them intentionally? Was I intending to each area of my life in its own rhythm? It's time for us to face the fact that there is no such thing as balance and quit beating ourselves up for not achieving it. Balance implies that all things are equal, that we spend equal time, equal effort, equal investment, and get equal results in every area of our life. That's just not realistic. We run around like crazy people trying to keep all the plates spinning and balanced. And when we recognize it just isn't possible. That week that we have an important deadline at work, it might require extra hours on the job. Or your high school senior is interested in visiting 6 different colleges, well, there went all your extra weekend hours. Or you have a big mission trip coming up at church, that might mean long days at the church and frozen dinners on the table. When these kind of things come up, those things throw us if we're trying to focus on balance. We feel the squeeze as we spend time in one area and it comes oozing out as guilt in another area. No, those verses encouraged us to pay attention to rhythms. Some things naturally rise to the forefront in our lives during certain seasons, and other things fall away. And then another time, those things may be reversed, whether it's for a season or a week or even a few hours within the same day. We can embrace the things that naturally rise to the top instead of fighting against them. In those verses in Matthew, Jesus taught us 3 specific things that we can do to find our rhythm. First, he said, "Come to me." Some translations say, "Get away with me." If we want to spend our time well, we need to get away and really understand our priorities. When we're in the middle of our day to day chaos, it's impossible to make good decisions about where we should be spending our time. We are naturally going to prioritize the need that's screaming the loudest or the thing that's jabbing our buttons the hardest. But when we get away, we can quiet all of those noises and we can hear from God about where we need to be spending time. We can put the screamers and the jabbers in their right place. Maybe they really are the most important things we should be spending our time on right now. Or maybe they're things we shouldn't be doing at all. Maybe the place we need to be spending our prime effort is on the quiet dream that's aching in our soul. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, "Krista, you don't know my life. I have a husband and children and a job, and I work at my kid's school, and I have a dog to take to the vet, and I don't have 5 minutes to myself, much less a whole day to go thinking about my priorities." Okay, let me tell you, I've been there. I know how that feels. But I'm going to give you a little bit of tough grace right now and tell you if you don't take the time to spend to understand where your priorities really are, you're not doing any of those things well. You don't have to go hole up in your bedroom all day and and ignore all your other responsibilities. You can do it in little blocks of time. You can take 15 minutes 3 times a week for a couple of weeks to examine each area of your life. It could be a long shower where you just let the water flow over you while the ideas flow around in your head. It could be a few minutes in the carpool line while you jot down thoughts and ideas in your notebook. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's necessary and it's something you really need to do in order to know your rhythms of life. In her book, Taming the To-Do List, author Glennis Whitwer shares 5 questions that I think will help you establish your priorities. Let's go through those. First, what can only I do? You are the only one who can raise your children. You are the only one who can love your husband well. You are the only one who can complete your responsibilities at your job. What are the things that only you can do? And then think of the things that others can do and let them do them. What has been entrusted to me? What are people depending on you for? Has your boss given you an important assignment at work that you really need to focus on? Are you involved in a ministry at your church where you really need to be an important leader in that? Things that people have entrusted to you that you've agreed to have become high on your priority list. Number 3, am I a good steward of what I already have? Sometimes we just get tired of what we're already doing and we just want to move on and do something else. But we need to make sure that we've been a good steward of what we already have on our plates and make sure we finish them well, that we don't leave them in a mess, and that we take care of those things that are already on our plate and be a good steward of them. Number 4, what passion or dream is on my heart? Okay, this is the thing that makes you excited to get up in the morning. It's the thing that grieves your heart when you know you could do something about it. It could be something small in your life, or it could be huge that in fact impacts 1,000 people. But whatever it is, it's what really stirs your spirit and gets you going. Number 5, what has God asked me to do that I haven't done yet? A lot of the time, God prepares us for different phases of our life. And so he'll ask you to do something in one phase that you're going to use in your next phase. So don't skip over those things that he's already been assigned to you, that you know are a calling on your life that you need to complete in this season. Complete those things before moving on to something else. Okay, let's talk about these questions a little bit. In the chat section, I want you to share your answers to one of these 5 questions as you try to identify what your top priorities are. Okay, second, Jesus said, work with me. Some versions say, take up my yoke. And I love that in this most famous passage about rest in the Bible, that Jesus didn't say, come away with me and lay down in the field of wildflowers and do nothing. No, he said, work with me. Now, sometimes we think that work is the exact opposite of rest. But when we are doing the work that we're called to do, it is energizing, not draining. It is life-giving, not soul-sucking. And even in times of busyness and chaos, doing what we're called to do can bring us peace. In order to find our rhythms, we have to embrace our worthy work. And I don't necessarily mean a job or a role. I mean the worthy work that we pour our lives into. At times, it may be tending to a child who needs extra attention. At other times, it could be an event that we're passionate about. But whatever it is, that is where we want to elevate its rhythm and let other things fall away. The other part of our work rhythm is not doing things that are not ours to do. And I know for go-getter dreamers like us, it's really hard to do. We like to have our hands involved in a lot of things. And it's not because we don't think others can do them well. It's because we just like doing. Or for me, it's because I like knowing. I often say that information is my love language. I just like to know what's going on. And so sometimes I'll take on assignments that are not mine just so that I can be in the know. But I've found that those things are the ones that I end up resenting. I dread doing them because they weren't mine to do in the first place. This is where we have to really be proactive to protect our rhythms. Because when we spend extra time in one place, the balance myth tells us that we are cheating others. We need to make a distinction between the amount of time we spend doing something with our level of affection and our responsibility we feel towards it. Focusing on a dream opportunity doesn't mean that we can throw off our commitment to love and care for our family. But it may mean that loving and caring from our family looks a little bit different in that season. Or it could mean that we have to put off that dream opportunity until loving and caring doesn't require so much of our time. Right now, I have a full-time job, a leadership position in a large ministry, a side business. I have volunteer roles at my church, and friends and family that I do want to keep up with. And people ask me all the time, how do I balance all of that? And the answer is that I don't balance it. My husband and I are in our empty nest years, and he works on the weekend when I'm at home. So I have plenty of time to do all the things that I feel called to do. But it wasn't always that way. When our kids were younger, I couldn't do all of those things. And even though I wanted to do all the things, my husband helped me protect my rhythm by asking me to only commit to one thing outside of my work and home responsibilities. So I could volunteer on one committee at my kids' school, or I could take on one project that I wanted to do around the house, or I could take on one committee at work outside of the work hours, but only one at a time. And so if I wanted to take on something new, I had to get to a good stopping point in what I was doing before and give up something in order to do something new. During that time, I learned how to say no to people who wanted me to do things that were not my assignment, and it kept me from being constantly frazzled in that busy season of life. So, okay, let's talk about our work. Share in the chat what is your highest priority right now and one thing that you've taken on that isn't your assignment. And lastly, Jesus says to find our rhythm, we need to learn from him. This is my favorite part. What Looking at what he does and how he does it. One thing I notice is that Jesus was totally present wherever he was present. If he were here today, he wouldn't be looking at his latest text messages on his iPhone during dinner with the family. Or he wouldn't be trying to write a blog post while watching the latest episode of This Is Us. And I am guilty of doing both of those things. How about you? No, Jesus pressed into the crowd and engaged with those around him when people told him there were other more important things that needed to be done. He listened, focused, and took care of the task where he was without being distracted by what was happening someplace else. He was totally present where he was present. And his choices didn't always make sense. People would come to him and say he had to go do something right now, and he would stay where he was. Or sometimes he would withdraw to rest when there were lots of needs around him that he could have taken care of. He didn't worry about what was going undone because he knew it would be done when there was a time to do it. He had in mind a specific time and place where those needs would be taken care of. This is the value of planning, and this has made the biggest difference in my ability to manage stress and guilt in my life. Your brain is wired to remind you of things. And you know that nagging feeling. Like when you're at the grocery store and your brain reminds you to make your haircut appointment, but the haircut place is not open today. And so you can't do that. And you wonder, why does your brain only remind you of these things when you can't do anything about them? Well, it turns out your brain is not reminding you to do that thing. Your brain is reminding you to make a plan to do that. It's something that psychotherapists call the Zeigarnik effect. It reminds you to make a plan and you don't have one, you become stressed out and frustrated. But when it reminds you to make a plan and you do have one, you can set that stress is eased because you know that you're going to do it when you have it planned for next week or next month or whatever other right time you have planned to do that. So when you're in the grocery store and that's an important thing for you to get done that day and the haircut appointment reminder comes to you, you can put a reminder in your phone to do it the next day when the place is opened. And your brain will be free to focus on what you're doing at the time instead of worrying about if you're going to remember tomorrow to do the thing you remembered to do today. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. For some people, I know that planning does not come naturally. It can feel like a box that pins you in and you become a slave to the plan. And that is never any fun. And that's definitely not living freely and lightly. But planning right becomes a structure that lets you move freely and make good decisions based on priorities that you've pre-decided rather than always chasing whatever seems like it's the most urgent at the moment. If you aren't good at planning, I suggest you start small. Instead of getting a big planner and filling it up with lots of lists and appointments and dates and goals and all those things, start small and start very simply. Just look at tomorrow and say, what are the top 3 things I need to get done tomorrow? And make a plan to do those things. Then once you've decided on those priorities, respect them. If something comes along that puts one of those high priority things in jeopardy, use what I call the doctor appointment test. If you had a doctor's appointment and something else came along, would you change or reschedule that doctor's appointment to do the new thing that came along? Let's look at an example. Let's say that you are in charge of a big community food drive, and this is something you're really passionate about, and it's one of your high priorities. You have on your list of things to do today to create some flyers so that you can get some publicity about the food drive. So, but when it was time to do that, your friend calls and asks if you can go to lunch with her. Apply the doctor appointment test. If you had a doctor's appointment and your friend called, what would you tell her? If your friend was calling just because you hadn't seen each other in a while and it was time to catch up, then you would tell her, no, I'm sorry, I have other commitments, but let's get together tomorrow or next week and catch up. But if your friend was calling because she had a big crisis in her life, like she lost her job and she really needs your help to sort through her emotions and to support and encourage her right now, maybe you would call and reschedule that doctor's appointment for another day. So do the same thing with your high priority activities. If something comes along that you really feel like needs to take priority over what you had planned to do, then make a new plan for doing your important thing and follow what you feel like is most important right now. But by making plans for your worthy work and treating them like the important appointments that they are, you can make wise choices about the distractions that will inevitably come up. Okay, one more time of practice. Think about your day tomorrow. Share in the chat comments one of the top 3 things you need to do as part of your worthy work tomorrow. Okay, friends, I know that none of this comes easily or naturally. Society has wired us to believe that we can do all things well all the time, but we know from our own experience, our own struggles, and our own guilt that balance is a myth. But when we are embracing rhythms, when we know our worthy work and our high priorities and we have a plan to meet them, we can choose where to spend our time instead of letting our time boss us around. So let's get away with Jesus, work with him, and learn how he does it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that this session has been helpful to you. I would love for you to join me on my website at doanewthing.com/dream, and I'll have some special resources there just for people who have attended this virtual retreat. Thanks and have a great rest of your day.
So my first summer home from college was full of unexpected things, and most of them were little. There was one major one that happened in the end of July. At the end of July, I received word that one of my childhood friends, another pastor's kid in the church, early 20s, healthy guy, strong Christian, had passed away on a mission trip. And we had his funeral the day before I went back to college. I went back kicking and screaming, as you can imagine. I thought about dropping out 50 million times before getting on that plane to go back. But man, those couple months, like the month of July and then August, September, October, basically, so shaped who I am today. And I want to say, like, there's nothing that prepares you to say goodbye to someone you thought you were going to be living life alongside of. Maybe not in the same state, maybe not seeing each other all the time, but at least, getting to old age together. There's nothing that prepares you for walking into a room and walking up to a casket and seeing him lying there lifeless. But he had life in him a week prior, but here he is lifeless. I mean, I kept looking at my friend Alex and thinking, like, no, he's gonna breathe again. Like, no, like, this is not happening. He's not lying there. He's just asleep. He's gonna breathe again. Like, this is not happening. I mean, he was healthy. Like, he was at the prime of his life and, about to start school again. And he didn't get a chance to get married. He didn't get a chance to have kids and to have a family and to lead a family and to continue in his music program. And, like, we're never going to lead worship together again. And it's just, it's so hard because, like, it so catches you off guard. You just don't think that that's going to happen to one of your friends. You don't think it's going to happen in your family. You don't think it's going to happen to your mom, to your dad, to your son, to your daughter, to your sister, to your brother, to your aunt, your uncle, whoever it is in your family that has passed away at a younger age. Like, you don't think it's going to happen. Like, you're like, no, that happens in the movies. No, that doesn't happen here. But it does. And I want to encourage you that if you're walking through something like that, first of all, I want to say it's okay not to be okay. I think that there's this lie that you have to just go live the rest of your life and you have to just, like, be gung-ho about the rest of your life. And, yes, they passed away, but we've got to just put a smile on. And, like, I just think that there's something, like, yes, you may be able to do that soon or in, the next year, whatever. But I do think, like, it's okay not to be okay. But in that, do not wallow. I remember the first month sitting at school, just kind of wallowing. And yes, it was so hard. And I didn't want to bury one of my childhood friends. And I didn't want to be at college trying to live my life, trying to work, trying to have a relationship, trying to go to class, trying to manage friendships and my time and homework and all this stuff, being far away from my family and my friends. Like, I didn't want any of that. But God had put me in that position for a reason. And as the years went on, I started to really see, like, my perspective on life really has changed since that event, since that day in July that I found out, since the day in July we buried him. My perspective has changed to, we have to live life bravely and boldly for Christ. We cannot waste whatever moments and hours and days and weeks and months and years that we have here on this earth. We can't waste it. Alex didn't waste it. Yes, he died young, but he did not waste his life. And so I want to look at that example, and I want to live my life like Alex lived his. However long I have, I want to live my life like what it is. It's a gift from God. And he's given us the people and the things in our life as gifts as well. And so, yes, hold tightly and love well. Love your people, but also hold them with open hands, because you never know how God is going to use their short lives to minister to your life and to others. And the ripple effect of Alex's death since has been so incredible and encouraging to see, not just in the place that he was serving overseas, but here among the former youth group members, here among my friends, and just in our separate lives, but also together, and even just as the church grieved and surrounded his parents and his family. Like, I have seen people just step up and just live life, and it's so encouraging. And so if you're walking through something similar, be brave, be bold, don't waste your life. And God is faithful. God is still good even when he takes our loved ones away. And God is faithful, and he's with us, and he walks with us through our grief. And so standing with you, I don't know what you're walking through today, but I'm standing with you. I've been there, and being on the other side of a terrible, hard life event, I want to say and encourage you that he is good and he is faithful.
So I'll introduce myself, and if you're here watching this live, go ahead and introduce yourself, I think in the comment section. So I'm Aaliyah Joy. I'm a wife and mother of 3, but my claim to fame outside of that, if I ever had one, is I'm known primarily for writing my feelings on the internet. It's kind of my thing. And most recently in a book titled Glorious Weakness, Discovering God in All We Lack. So that is my shameless plug for my book that comes out in April. Yeah, so here we are, and we are going to talk about dreams. And as you might be able to tell from the title of my upcoming book, that has weakness and lack in it, I am the girl who talks about weakness and lack, but also glory. So I'm super fun at parties. Specifically a little bit about myself and my story. I have bipolar disorder and some chronic health issues that I deal with, and I write often about mental health and suicidal ideation, poverty, doubt, faith, failure, race, sexual abuse and embodiment, body image. So, like I said, it's like a really good party. Some of you guys might be checking your screen now to make sure that you're tuned into the right session on dreams. You might be thinking, this sounds more like a nightmare with all of these topics, but I think that there's a place for talking about what happens to us when our dreams are deferred or delayed or derailed, because that happens to all of us. I was supposed to have this recorded on Saturday, and I am recording at midnight at my table because that did not happen. So if you want to talk about dreams, I am not your girl. Not dreams, goals. Talk about dreams. I'm not your girl. But if you want to talk about the intersection of having dreams that you're brave enough to dream, you also have to be brave enough to watch some of those dreams die, often a brutal death. And I am here to tell you it's okay. Not just okay, but necessary. I think ambition and determination aren't bad things. It just isn't the only thing. I always get a little itchy, I don't know, like hives when I hear people, usually of the motivational speaker variety, say, never let anything stand in the way of your dreams. And I'm always like, especially when they're Christian speakers, I'm like, have these people read the Bible? Because the whole thing is full of letting go and being rerouted, of the death and rebirth of dreams, of derailment and disappointment, but also of discovery. And so I want to talk about that place. If we never let go of any of our dreams, a lot more of us would probably be veterinarians or ballerinas or astronauts. And if you're any of those things, like, great, good for you for hanging on to those. But for most of us, for a lot of us, when people ask us when we were kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Those questions have changed and evolved. The answers to those have changed and evolved as we grew. And as we realized, we don't actually want to put our hands anywhere near an animal's rectum or bleed through toe shoes, or, that we're freakishly afraid of heights and claustrophobic and bad at math and do not want to be catapulted up into space. So life changes us. Age changes us. Some dreams endure and some fade, and some feel as though they're ripped from us. For the girl who wore a white pillowcase on her head like a train and marched past her, procession of stuffed animals only to say I do to her teddy bear and exchange, rings and vows, an empty ring finger on into adulthood can feel like the death of the life that she intended and thought that she was going to have, the dreams she held. So for those who've said goodbye next to hospital beds and gone home only to stare longingly at the side of their bed that will never be slept in again, dreams die. And for those who pee on a stick month after month only to realize that they've just wasted $14.99 on another test that they're never going to ace, dreams feel cruel. So for those of us who thought our lives would be extraordinary and instead wonder if this is all there is while we struggle to make a living and pay our bills and think of another recipe that we can make with, the chicken thighs that were on sale at Kroger or Aldi's or whatever store you have where you're at. For those of us who thought we would do more and be more and have more and see more and know more, but instead face the reality that some prayers are never answered the way that we'd hoped. And we can wonder, what use do we have of our dreams? We might wonder if dreams are a luxury that only others can afford. I know for me, when dreams die, I've often been faced with two different roads, two diverging paths. And the first one, I think, is we let hope die with our dreams. We can hunker down into reality and we can say, this is my portion, this is my cup, this is all I'm going to ever have and all I'll ever be and all I should ever want. And I think we trim our sails and we hunker down, and sometimes we think, I think sometimes we see this couched as sort of this super spiritual snazzy terms like contentment and gratefulness, and it can look kind of pious and righteous because we've accepted our lot in life and we aren't greedy and we're not striving and we're not selfish. But I think in those instances there's a tendency to turn into the servant in the parable who takes his one talent and buries it because he's afraid of his master. He doesn't want to squander what little he has, and goodness knows, like, it's not very much. Everybody else got more, and so he risks nothing. And when we live like that servant, we've learned not to pray to God like a loving father. We've learned not to serve and walk with God like he can be trusted, like he loves us and means the best for us. And we don't believe God's intention is always for us. But God's intention for us is always his best. God's intention for us is always for our flourishing and for his glory, and those purposes are never dissonant, even though it can feel like it. And so those times when we think God is holding out on us and that there's nothing that we can do about it, and we resign ourselves to sort of a hopelessness and call it faithfulness. There are times when I have faced the very, very frigid edge hilt of depression, and it has sliced right through my desire and dreams, and it's left me gutted and empty. I didn't care if I lived or died. I didn't care about glory or dreams. Indeed, at those times I really had none. It was hard to hold on to anything. It's hard to hold on to dreams when your reality feels like a nightmare. And sometimes my world feels impossibly small. Sometimes when it's really bad, it's the square of sunlight that stretches across my wood floor, where I fold myself into, and I sit there looking out the window because my asthma is acting up and I can't go outside, but I still crave the sunlight on my cheeks, and I feel like the walls are closing in. Sometimes my world is the four corners of my pillow, where my head falls for what seems like days at a time. When my bipolar depression hits the hardest, sometimes I can't get out of bed, and that is my whole world. Sometimes my world is confined by the walls of my heart, where I have convinced myself that dreams are for people with more money, or more talent, or more education, or more perfect skin, and a smaller pant size, and pearly white teeth, and let's be honest, sometimes more whiteness. I'm just going to say it. When dreams die, the second road, I think, is to turn to fantasy. And so I'm talking about these two different diverged roads. And the fantasy is sort of this distorted imagination where everything true and right and good becomes parodied. So relationships get manipulated, and we lose the heart of God and holy imagination. And our fantasies de-center God and re-center our own glory and satisfaction above all else. And so if God isn't, he's not scarce in this, he's just not necessary. And so in the first one we have scarcity, and the second one we have just a God that is ignored, and we think we can reach our own sort of pinnacle, and we can be our own hero, and we can rescue ourselves if we just cling strongly to our fantasies. And I think sometimes in society people look at us and they would admire our tenacity or our stick with it, single-minded determination. These are the ones who are like, they're going after their dreams, we're the master of our destiny, and the wind is in our sails, we're the one that gets things done. But I think in those instances sometimes our dreams may have died, but we think if we just push hard enough we can make a replica appear. We can make the golden calf, we can make the idol, and the next best thing to authentic. And in those instances we're like Sarah pimping out Hagar, we're building our own way to Babel, we are Eve devouring forbidden fruit. And I think the lonely heart whose dream of wedded bliss died can have porn instead, or the bored housewife can become insta-famous and curate an identity to be seen and adored and coveted, and your ministry can become a vehicle for your ego and success, and you learn to say all the right things at all the right times, but it's fantasy. And I will just say this: if you're delving into fantasy and you're serving yourself, repent. That's really all I can say about that. If you're not sure, if you wonder and question your intentions, ask God. He's faithful, and if you ask him to reveal your junk, he will. and he has for me, and I know for other people. So we're meant to have good, healthy, God-given desires and good, healthy, God-given dreams, because without dreams we would be hopeless. And I need a vision beyond my four walls, beyond the corners of my pillowcase, beyond my atrium and ventricles, beyond the reach of my fingertips and my nearsightedness. I need to tap into divine purpose, to know that this small life of mine matters, not because of what I can accomplish, because sometimes what I can accomplish is not much, but because God doesn't make spare or unnecessary parts, and I have a purpose, And the dreams that God has given me aren't in vain. Even the silly ones, even the ones that don't come true, they serve a purpose. And I think that when we think about how our dreams connect us to hope, I truly believe that for those who know Christ, our native tongue is the language of hope. And we are tethered to imagination, to wonder, to the heart of God who made us dreamers. A little over 7 years ago, I think, 7 years ago, I had this very simple dream of learning to sew. And I had a 6-year-old daughter, and my mom had sewed forever, and I never had the patience to learn. I just wasn't interested. But then in my 30s, I signed up for an adult ed class, and I met at this local high school, and once a week I would drag my mom's old sewing machine with my little pin cushion and scissors into this old art classroom and worked on stitches and basting and seam ripping and trying to figure out how to read patterns and cut on the bias. And my final class project was little matching aprons for my daughter and I, like ruffles and 6-year-old little girl. But first I learned to cut and pin and measure out dreams. I had this vision of what it was supposed to look like. I had this pattern, and the first cut is the hardest because what you have is a bolt of unspoiled fabric, and once you cut it, it can't be uncut. And so just like the talent, the parable of the talent, once you've invested or spent it, it's out there. And dreams cost you. You might lose, you might fail, you might have to start over, you might have to rip out all the seams, you might sew the whole thing and realize it doesn't fit or it doesn't flatter you, or the color is all wrong. I, shortly after learning how to sew, became obsessed with sewing because there's nothing cuter than a 6-year-old in handmade clothes. And this is before I was writing online or anything like that, and I was obsessed with it. Now I know that I was in sort of a hypermanic phase, but I made curtains and costumes and dresses and everything. And but patterns are expensive, and so I started scouring the internet for free ones, and I discovered this whole plethora of crafting sewing blogs that had like free patterns that you could download, and they were just dedicated to like crafts and sewing, and I was in heaven. But the better I got at it, so did my desire for like fancier gadgets and a better machine, and I wanted to be able to do more stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with the blogosphere for long, but there was a time when sponsored posts were like all the rage. I know that some people still do them, but in the golden days when I first started blogging, companies would pay like influential bloggers or offer free samples of products in return for them like blogging about it, name recognition and all that. So whereas now we have more like Instagram influencers that influence people on Instagram. Back then they had brand awareness that was on blogs, it seemed like more. And I was enamored by this silhouette machine. And so for those uninitiated into all things crafty, it's this very, very expensive machine that cuts like fabric and vinyl and cool things, and you can make a bunch of stuff, and you can make your whole house look like a Pinterest fever dream, which back then I actually wanted. So needless to say, I wanted one, and I thought, hey, I'm crafty. I can decorate and repurpose and sew, and I don't think that there's a single piece of furniture, probably in my whole house, that I haven't gotten from a garage sale or a thrift store that I haven't repurposed and sanded down. And so I got this really brilliant dream as I started to follow more blogs that this was something that maybe I could do. And then all of the bloggers that I was following, there was this period where they had this blue and black Oric vacuum. It was like this lightweight vacuum, and they were all testing it out, and I was like, sold, I want the vacuum. And I have crumbs, I have Cheerios, I have, toddler, I have all kinds of stuff in the carpet. I want to sample that crap, like free stuff. And so my dream was born. It was Aaliyah, the do-it-yourself blogger, and I would blog about home projects and maybe some posts about batch freezer cooking. I kid you not, I did a whole series on it, and if any of you are my actual readers, you know how ludicrous that is. It's 3 parts. 3 parts about batch freezer cooking, and throw in some tips on parenting, and I am laughing and dying inside because what the heck did I know about parenting my kids who were still really itty-bitty? But I didn't let common sense or lack of experience deter me. I had a silhouette machine and an Oric vacuum to get, and so I started a blog, and I wrote some posts, including the freezer cooking ones, and I tried to blog some projects. Only the thing about DIY blogging is it isn't as easy as it looks. It's this whole thing that I did not even consider, like taking decent pictures, which obviously I'm in my kitchen at midnight and with bad lighting, and painstakingly documenting the whole process, and it just bored me to tears. I would get so enthralled in my project at the time. I think one of the first things I did was our headboard. I had gotten this old headboard and I was refinishing it, and I had added crown molding to it, and I realized that I had sanded and painted and done the whole dang thing and had only taken a before picture, and then I was all the way done. And so that was like a literal do-it-yourself, like, here's my headboard before and here it's after, and you literally have to do it all yourself because I did not document or take pictures of any of the steps. So it obviously wasn't something that I was good at, and my dreams of my precious silhouette machine and my Oric vacuum were not to be, but I still had this blog set up, and I have always loved writing. I've always written, but I just never imagined that I would be doing it online for actual readers. That silly dream opened the door for what God knew was coming. And in the months following my blog inauguration and horrible do-it-yourself fails, I ended up going through one of the worst depressions that I have ever been through. It lasted for months, and it was then that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I didn't share that for a long time at first because of the stigma and shame, and I didn't want to be crazy. And but it was really bad, and I wrote through the depression, and it was then that writing became this lifeline to know that I wasn't alone, and I would just cast words out along the way like breadcrumbs, hoping I'd be able to find my way home. And I didn't start out with the dream that I would share my weakness, my pain, my struggles, my doubts with my readers, but slowly God brought people that understood me, people who felt the things that I felt, people who knew how hard it is to hold on to hope, people who wanted to believe that God is still good, but whose lives made that so incredibly difficult. And so I wrote, mostly to know that I wasn't alone. But over time, my writing began to shift, and there was a point, many, many points, when I thought, I don't need it anymore. I don't need to know I'm not alone anymore. I can write in a journal, and I can express my thoughts and my feelings, and then I can process, and then I can tuck it back under my mattress and call it good. But by then, God was beginning to birth a new dream, and this one wouldn't let me go. And this one was a passion to let others know that they're not alone either. And it became less about me looking to meet my need and more to bear witness to the goodness of God in my life for those who still needed to know that truth, that even in my impossibly small world, even in my small patch of light, God is good and gives us good dreams, and he gives us hope. And for me, writing a book was the kind of dream on par with riding my pet unicorn back to my castle. I didn't even know that I could dream that big, but God did. And he started with some sewing, some patterns. I wouldn't have evaluated my life and thought, surely this is too big a dream for me. Like, I never would have started a blog with the intention of getting a book published. But a vacuum that everybody was using, like, that seemed doable. And I think, how many of you have dreams that you feel are too big for you, and you wonder, who am I to even think God cares about this? I'm the last person to promise you, if you dream it, it will come true, because that's just not how it works. But maybe that's not even the point. I mean, I never got my vacuum, but here I am 7-ish years later, and my first book launches in 6 weeks, and I'm on this virtual retreat talking to all of you lovely folks who are joining me and spending your Saturday with me. And in many ways, this is a dream come true, because, I mean, come on, you guys are awesome. But also, the reality is that the past 2 months, I've barely been able to get out of bed because my depression hit so hard. It's been so bad. And the reality is that during the writing of my manuscript, I had so many things go wrong. I was just waiting for the river to turn to blood and for, like, the locusts to just come swarming down. It was really a shame that sackcloth and ashes are so yesterday, because they would have really come in handy. It was a lot. And I mean, I got bit by a black widow that was hiding in my bra in the closet, and I can't even make this stuff up. Like, I had to go to it was bad. Just imagine. It's just bad. This is PG, so I'm going to spare you, but I ended up in the hospital and immediate care, and it was this whole long ordeal, and then my asthma was out of control, and I was on like 9 million steroids, which is super fun. Like, roid rage, and like, it's like turning into a teenage boy, all pimply and gross. And I had a podcast interview with Becky, and I had a manic episode and depressing episodes, and I had an ovarian cyst burst, and I passed a kidney stone. I mean, it was like crazy. My ankle injury, I mean, I can't even remember all the stuff. It was like, it got to the point where I was like, I'm not even going to share anything, because people are just going to think, like, what the heck, like, is happening to you? And it was brutal. It was super brutal. It's like a walking cyclone of misery and failing parts. And I remember telling God, I absolutely, like, I'm already writing a book on weakness. I'm already writing a book on lack. I absolutely do not need any more material. And it just kept coming. And it was the weakest probably that I've ever felt in my life, because it was just so long. And during writing, I wrestled with just every iteration of imposter syndrome there is. I thought, I'm an overweight high school dropout who battles mental illness and suicidal ideation, and who struggles financially, especially with the medical bills, and I'm writing a book, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, this seems right. But I realized I couldn't have written that book from any other place. And sometimes the dreams we have begin in failure. They begin in despair. They begin in dead ends and the discovery that God has so much more for you than you ever imagined. And it doesn't mean it won't suck or that it won't hurt. It doesn't mean that you won't grieve the lost things, because that's real. And it doesn't mean you won't feel alone or confused. This dream feels like it cost me everything. Like, I spent it all. I took that one measly talent God gave me. It was my love for words, and I hurled it out there, risking everything. And it was scary as heck. Like, it's still really scary. But even so, God's goodness continues to astound me, and his dreams for me and for my life and for the people that he calls far surpasses anything that I could ever imagine. And if you want to know the truth of it, the dream was never the book. The dream was the God that I came to know when my life fell apart. And the outpouring of that is the words in the book. But the dream was that God was with me in the thick of it all, a God who would sit with me in the dark so I could bear witness to his light, a God who continued to come for me over and over and over, a God who will never leave me and forsake me, and who just continues to speak this language of hope into my weary heart, my depressed spaces. When dreams fail me, I want to say it again, God's intention is always our flourishing and his glory, and they are never, ever dissonant purposes. And I know that can be really hard to reconcile. I've struggled with it, but I know this now, and it's no secret that these past few years have been full of, obviously, really hard seasons and trials, and yet I have never heard it clearer. The dreams spoken into me, and just this identity of being loved every moment of every day, even the ones when I can't get out of bed, that I am cherished and I am adored and I am called. And I'm called even when I don't have anything to offer, even when I can't do anything. And when you think that you have nothing to offer, you're beloved anyway. And even when it seems that all hope is lost, God says, I'm with you always. And it's something we get wrong sometimes in our rush to be obedient and have good, strong faith. This idea that we either have to die to our dreams or cling to them until God wrestles them out of our cold, dead fists. And sometimes death might be, a necessary part of dreams. And I'm not going to lie, those dying parts ache. But death was never the point. Death is never the end deal. God deals in new life, and alive and abiding in Christ is the most dazzling wonder of it all, and it's where hope lives. And I don't know what your dreams are. Maybe today you're just hoping that you get some peace and quiet and you can watch this and drink your coffee and lay around in your pajamas, and if that's you, more power to you. I heartily approve your life choices and would be joining right in if I wasn't trying to launch a book. But maybe as you continue to listen to this retreat and the other speakers, you can just remember that God is with you in those secret places in your heart where you have dreams you can't even say aloud yet. Like, they're so scary, or they're so silly, or they're so ridiculous, but they're there for a reason, because nothing is wasted. Like, even the detours. Oh, what is happening? Shoot. Did it cut off, or is it still recording? I hope it's still recording. Yeah, nothing is wasted, even the detours, even the deaths, even the derailments. God has a purpose in it all, and he will use all of it. And so I just want to encourage you that if you're in a season where you feel really lost and you feel really confused and you think, I've clung to this dream so hard and I don't know if I should let it go. I don't know if I can trust God with my desires. I don't know if, I don't know what he's going to make of this or make of me. I think the thing that we find in those experiences is that God is so with us, so present, so willing to revive and stoke that hope in us and those dreams. And that the dream isn't the book, the dream isn't the career, the dream isn't the ministry. The dream is that when we are alive in Christ and we are doing the thing that he purposed us for, it's brilliant, and his presence is there. And there are times when, I feel like God made me a writer. He gave me words to write. And I feel his pleasure. It's like Chariots of Fire. Eric Liddell says, God made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. And I feel that when I write. I feel like God gave me words, and when I write, I feel his pleasure. And I feel alive when I'm writing, but it costs and it's hard, and I didn't get here in a linear, it wasn't from point A to point B. I had to sow a lot of really bad dresses, including one where I it was like this bubble skirt for my daughter, and I sewed the bottom of it together, not once, not twice, 3 times. 3 times I sewed the bottom seam together, so it was like a sack where there's like no room for her legs to come out. And every single time I sat there and I did the seam ripper and I whatever, and then I finally got it, and she wore it once, and then she never wore it again because she said it itched. But anyway, all that to say, I don't sew anymore, but I do write, and God knew all along where he was going to have me, and he directs our path, and he's faithful. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in a season where your dreams, you're dealing with your little kids and you think, I have this thing I'm going to do, but I don't have time. I can't even go to the bathroom by myself or eat a hot meal. I can't remember, if you're single and you're thinking, I can't have the dream unless I get married, or unless I have kids, or unless I, get the career or do the thing or have the ministry or get the opportunity. The dream is not those things. The dream can come alive in those things. The dream can be part of those things. I think that's great. I think it's wonderful to tether ourselves to the reality of this world and the things that we love. But ultimately, God, in the midst of that, is the dream come true. It's the castle and the unicorns. And it might not always feel like that, but his presence, when you know that it doesn't matter if you can't get out of bed for 2 months, God adores you. That is life-changing. That will transform you, because you'll have an understanding of the depths of God's grace, and it is breathtaking. It is tremendous. His heart towards us is so tender, and once we grasp that, we will spend it all. We will spend it all every single time. So I just want to encourage you on this Saturday morning to spend it. Don't waste it. Don't bury it in the ground.
Hey ladies, my name is April, and I'm going to be sharing a story of bravery with you today. It's not an extraordinary act of bravery, but kind of an ordinary act that I've had to choose to make every day. And I wanted to share this one with you because I feel like that's probably what most of us are facing. So the past year and a half for me has been a difficult season. And it feels funny to say that because I haven't had anything tragic happen. I know people who are going through way harder things for me. And so I think that was my first act of bravery in this whole situation, was to admit that it's a difficult season for me. Because if something doesn't seem difficult enough to me, then I don't really want to admit that it's hard. So I have 2 kids. One is 3 and one is almost 7. And so my oldest one started kindergarten last year. And within a few weeks, it became obvious that she was really struggling academically. She was constantly falling behind in assessments. And it's kindergarten, so I was like, how serious should we take this? But I didn't think I would ever take it very seriously in kindergarten, but it started me down this spiral of worry for her. So much that I tried to constantly control the situation. I constantly emailed her teacher. I tried to work with her after school on things. And I just worried about it. Basically, I prayed she wouldn't get certain teachers the next year. I was just in a constant state of worry. And of course, my mind always goes to the worst scenario possible. So when things like autism and ADHD were thrown out on the table, I cried and I freaked out, and I told my husband, she's never going to leave the house. She'll never get a job, which is ridiculous. But that tends to be where my brain goes in these situations. So I realized 2 things at this time. One was that I had assumed school would always be easy for my kids because it came easy to me and to my husband. And when I realized that it wasn't easy for her, I had to admit that I had kind of made an idol out of education and out of grades that I didn't even know was there. So I had to admit that and confess that to the Lord. And then I also heard God telling me, I love her way more than you do, and I have her in my hands. And so I had to really struggle to place that trust in his hands for her. And so that's kind of the next act of bravery, was really, confessing my sin and also entrusting my daughter to the Lord, who never lets us down. But frankly, even though he's never let me down, I struggle all the time to trust him. And so it's been an everyday decision for me. When worry comes up, I have to give her over to him over and over and over again. And we're still in the midst of going through tests and trying to figure out what's going on with her and what her needs are. And so I still don't have answers, and that's really hard for me too. But it's, again, a daily calling to trust God, that he has her in his hands, and that he's doing a great work in her. And I also realized that, most importantly, I really just want my kids to know Christ. And so that is my prayer for them, and all these other expectations that we put on them. They may not be God's plan for them, and that's okay. And maybe you're going through something similar where you are anxious about the future, or you don't really have any answers yet. And so I wanted to share my story with you in hopes to encourage you, that you're not alone, and that, God counts every tear that we cry. I think that's amazing to me. He sees our anxiety, he sees our fears, and he wants us to entrust him with those things. And it does take an act of bravery to do that, because it's so much easier for us to try to control the situation. But in the end, we can't. And so I hope that my story encourages you today. I don't really have a resolution to it yet, but hopefully that will come soon.
So this is always the saddest part of the day. But things have to come to an end, right? That was so great. I always lose my ability to speak coherently when I'm just feeling so relaxed, but also challenged and encouraged. Does that make sense? Yeah. What is something that really stuck out to you in session 2? So just thinking about this last session, kind of the same questions from session 1. What surprised you? What was really profound that is sticking with you and you can't quite shake? Excuse me. Share with us in the chat room or in your participant guide. Just make a note of it. I think it's always really interesting to have to really focus in on that one thought. What's something that you really want to remember from this session? So not even thinking about the morning. That's so long ago. Don't even think about that part. But what's something you want to remember? What is and what is something that really challenged you? So I'm going to put those 4 questions up. You got 2 to 3 minutes. Think about those, and then we'll come back together and kind of get the big picture look. Okay, so now let's take another step further back. So looking at the whole day, maybe you want to look at the things that you noted from session 1 and from session 2 together. What is the number one thing that you learned or noticed, or just what's that number one thought? If you had to boil down everything that you heard today that was really encouraging or really challenging, what's the one idea that you want to remember? Yeah, I would love for you to share with us in the chat room. But also make a note for yourself, because let's be honest, we're not like super great at remembering these things, right? What is a first step that you're going to take based on that number one idea that you're taking away? What's something, what you feel like is the, as Emily P. Freeman says, by the way, she has a great podcast and a new book coming out that are both called The Next Right Thing. So what's the next right thing for you to do based on that number one thing that you're taking away? What are you starting to dream about? Do you feel any dreams kind of starting to come out of you? Are you feeling like that dream that you've been trying to rationalize away is maybe something that you really actually need to start dreaming about? Maybe there's a forgotten dream that's popped into your head. Ooh, that would be so fun, like a treasure hunt in your heart, in your brain, in your soul, right? And then I think the last thing that's also really important when we think about dreaming and taking next right steps and things is, who are the people that you're going to include in your dreams? Who are the people that you're going to choose to trust with it, that if a dream turns out that it's not going to work out, that will grieve that dream with you, and if it does work out, that will celebrate with you. I want to challenge you to find those people. Not all people are trustworthy with your dreams. Like, not all people can handle that. But it is worth figuring out who the people are that you can, because it's really special when somebody wants to share a dream with you. So again, I'm going to throw those questions up for you. Feel free to chat about them or just reflect and write them down. Take a couple minutes just to do that. I encourage you to maybe like free write about your dreams. Just make lists of all the things that you dream of, or if you journal, maybe you process through talking. So sit down with somebody and just verbal diarrhea all of the things that you might want to dream about, and just get it all out, and maybe things will start to form after that. But I think one of the really important steps of dreaming is just starting to get it out. So I hope that you'll be able to do that. Follow up with one of the people who spoke today. Again, all the information is in the participant guide. That's in your email. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about what you're dreaming. We'd love to hear about what your like number one takeaway thing is, or what you're feeling challenged by, what's sticking with you. I really, really mean that very much. These speakers are wonderful in how genuinely they want to build relationships, and that's part of the reason why I have included their voices here, is because they're just so intentional about listening and cheering you on and whatnot. So some things to keep in mind. Brave Together is a Facebook community as well as these retreats, and so we'd love to have you in the Facebook group if you're not already. It's just a great space. We kind of run the gamut from just like silly, like, what's your favorite GIF at the moment, or what's, share your ideal vacation, and just using a picture or something like that. Sometimes we play games, but then also we really celebrate what are the wins that you've had this week, whether huge or small. It doesn't really matter. What are you really proud of? Those kinds of things, and just being really intentional as a community about building each other up and encouraging each other, and when life is hard, being really honest about that too. And it's really special. So I hope you'll join us there. Other than that, feel free to hang around. The chat room will be open until 2:30. I'm just so glad that I got to share this day with you. Feel free to stay in touch. You have my email address. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions, or you just kind of want to follow up after the day. I would love that. So thanks again for being here with us, for dreaming with us, and I really hope that the dreaming will continue long after this afternoon. Have a great day, friends.